June 15, 1977. United States Courthouse, Foley Square, Manhattan. The press gallery is packed 3 deep. Reporters standing against the back wall with notebooks open and pencils ready. Because Nicky Barnes doesn't just go on trial, he puts on a show. And today, the finale is coming. He sits at the defense table in a white suit so pristine it almost glows under the fluorescent lights, custom-tailored with peak lapels and mother-of-pearl buttons. The diamond pinky ring catches the light every time he moves his hand, sending little galaxies spinning across the mahogany. He's 41 years old and looks like he owns the building. His lawyers, 3 of them in charcoal gray, lean in periodically to whisper strategy, but Barnes barely acknowledges them. He's watching the jury with the patient attention of a man who's already calculated every possible outcome and found most of them acceptable. The government thinks they have him on tax evasion, 7 counts. They've presented receipts for fur coats, luxury cars, penthouse apartments. They've shown the jury photographs of Barnes at Studio 54, Barnes at Yankee Stadium in a private box, Barnes stepping out of a Rolls Royce on 125th Street while old women carrying groceries step aside to let him pass. The assistant U.S. attorney, Richard Crawford, has spent 3 weeks building a case that Nicky Barnes lives like a king but reports income like a pauper, and somewhere in that gap lies a felony that government can finally make stick. Crawford is 50-something, Yale law, silver hair cut short and neat, the kind of prosecutor who sees his job not just as enforcing the law, but as maintaining a certain natural order. He wears his grandfather's cufflinks and his father's contempt for people who don't know their place. For 3 weeks, he circled Barnes like a hunter around a leopard, professionally cautious, building his cage of evidence 1 bar at a time. But now, in closing arguments, with the jury looking tired and the judge checking his watch, Crawford decides it's time to stop being professional. He stands at the lectern, hands gripping the sides, and surveys the jury with the confidence of a man who's never lost anything that mattered. Then he turns slowly, deliberately, and looks at Nicky Barnes, really looks at him. And when he speaks, his voice carries that particular tone of Ivy League disdain that can make even facts sound like insults. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, look at the defendant. Really look at him. The white suit, the diamonds, the fur coats we've seen in evidence. This isn't a businessman sitting before you. This is a circus clown who somehow convinced himself he's royalty, a Harlem street dealer playing dress-up in clothes he can't legally afford, sitting in a courtroom he doesn't belong in, thinking that if he puts on enough shine, enough sparkle, we'll forget what he actually is. The courtroom goes still. One of Barnes's attorneys half rises from his chair, then stops, unsure. A reporter in the 3rd row actually gasps, then tries to cover it with a cough. Crawford continues, warming to his theme now, his voice rising slightly. And you know why he thinks he can sit here in a white man's courtroom, wearing a white man's suit, acting like he's one of us? Because we let him. Because somewhere along the line, someone forgot to tell this particular Negro his place. Someone forgot to explain that there's a difference between having money and deserving respect. That you can't just buy your way into civilization with stolen cash and pretend the dirt doesn't still show underneath. The lead defense attorney is on his feet now, voice cutting across Crawford's speech. Objection, Your Honor, this is outrageous. This is sustained, the judge says, but his voice lacks conviction, like a man who knows the bell can't be unrung. Mr. Crawford, confine yourself to the evidence and the law.
Crawford nods, perfectly composed, smoothing his tie. Of course, Your Honor. My apologies to the court. But he's not apologizing to Barnes, and everyone knows it. He returns to the lectern and continues his closing, now focused on tax code and financial records, but the poison is already in the water. Nicky Barnes doesn't move, doesn't react, doesn't give Crawford the satisfaction of anger or pain. He just smiles. It's a small smile, barely there, the kind of expression a card player makes when he realizes his opponent has just bet everything on a losing hand. He leans over to his lead attorney, Marcus Williams, a brother from Howard Law who's won 17 straight cases, and whispers just loud enough for the front row to hear. Tell Mr. Crawford he just bought the most expensive insult of his life. 72 hours. He's going to apologize on the courthouse steps. If he doesn't, I'm taking what he loves most. Williams looks at him sharply, trying to read if Barnes is serious or just posturing for the cameras. But Barnes is already leaning back, fingers steepled, watching the jury like a man watching a roulette wheel he knows is rigged in his favor. The deliberation takes 90 minutes. Not guilty on all 7 counts. The jury foreman, a black postal worker from Queens, reads the verdict with something that might be satisfaction in his voice, and the courtroom erupts. Reporters sprint for the doors. Barnes's people in the gallery, men in leather coats and women in furs, start cheering until the judge bangs his gavel and threatens to clear the room. Crawford stands frozen at the prosecution table, papers scattered in front of him, looking like a man who's just watched his whole understanding of the universe collapse. Outside, the courthouse steps are a circus of flashbulbs and microphones. Barnes emerges through the heavy doors surrounded by his legal team and his crew, walking slow, taking his time, letting the moment breathe. He's put on sunglasses, gold-rimmed aviators that catch the afternoon sun. The questions come from every direction, reporters shouting over each other. "Nicky, how do you feel about the verdict? What's next for you? Are you going to sue the government?" Barnes raises one hand and the crowd actually quiets, which is its own kind of power. He's about to speak when the crowd parts, and Richard Crawford comes pushing through, briefcase in hand, heading for a waiting town car. His face is stone, professional defeat worn like armor, but there's something else underneath, rage perhaps, or humiliation, that he's trying to metabolize into cold determination. He nearly makes it past without engagement, but then he stops. Turns, looks at Barnes with those prosecutor's eyes that have sent 200 men to prison, and says loud enough for the microphones to catch. "Still playing king, Barnes? The circus is over. Go back to Harlem where you belong." The reporters go silent, sensing blood in the water. Barnes removes his sunglasses slowly, folding them with deliberate care, and the smile that crosses his face is the kind that makes smart men nervous. He takes 2 steps toward Crawford, close enough to smell the man's expensive cologne, and speaks in a voice that's perfectly calm, perfectly clear. 72 hours, counselor. The clock started when you opened your mouth. Use the time wisely."
Then he turns, descends the steps, and slides into the back of a gold Cadillac Eldorado with vanity plates that read King. The car pulls away from the curb and disappears into downtown traffic, leaving Crawford standing on the steps with reporters shoving microphones in his face, asking what Barnes meant, what's going to happen. But Crawford just shakes his head and gets into his car without another word. What nobody knows, what even his lawyers don't know, is that Nicky Barnes doesn't go to Harlem. The Cadillac heads north, then east, then pulls into an underground garage on 57th Street. Barnes takes a private elevator to a penthouse that officially belongs to a shell corporation registered in Delaware, owned by another shell corporation in Panama, traced back to a series of real estate trusts that would take the IRS 3 years to untangle. The apartment is minimalist, expensive, anonymous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, white leather furniture, a bar stocked with Remy Martin Louis XIII and single malt scotch that costs more per bottle than most people make in a month. Frank James is already there, sprawled on the couch, watching the news coverage on 3 different channels with the sound muted. Frank is Barnes's oldest friend, grew up on the same block in Harlem, did his first bid in the same juvenile facility. He's the muscle and the memory, the one who remembers every slight, every debt, every favor. Next to him is Guy Fisher, younger, sharper, the business mind who turned Barnes's street operation into a corporate structure with territories and hierarchies and profit-sharing agreements. Barnes pours himself 3 fingers of Remy and settles into a chair, loosening his tie. Crawford thinks he won something today. Frank laughs, hard and short. Man got his ass handed to him in court and he's still talking shit. He wants to die? "No," Barnes says, sipping the cognac, feeling it burn, clean and warm. "He wants to feel superior. He wants to put me in my place, because in his world, a nigger from Harlem doesn't get to wear white suits and walk out of federal court smiling. He needs me to know I'm beneath him. That's what this is about. Not the law, not justice, just him needing the universe to make sense again." Guy is taking notes on a yellow legal pad, always thinking 3 moves ahead. "So what are we doing? We sending a message?" Barnes sets down his glass and looks at both of them with eyes that have seen the inside of 3 prisons and the tops of 5 penthouses, and learned something essential about power in the distance between those 2 points. Crawford thinks power is the badge, the title, the law degree. He doesn't understand real power. Real power is knowing what a man values most and knowing you can take it. Frank sits up, interested now. "You want to kill him?" Killing him is easy. Killing him is what any normal nigger would do, right? That's what Crawford expects. That's what fits his understanding of the world. No, we're going to be smarter. We're going to do something he can't prepare for, can't understand, can't file a legal brief against. Guy taps his pen against the pad. What does Crawford love? Barnes smiles, that same cold smile from the courtroom. 3 things. His reputation, Yale Law, 30 years as a prosecutor, never been caught dirty. His money, and he's got a lot of it, more than a government salary should provide. And that fucking sailboat he talks about every chance he gets.
The legacy, 40 feet of teak and brass, keeps it at Greenwich Yacht Club, belongs to his grandfather supposedly, but actually bought with dirty money from fixing cases for the Italians back in the 60s. The room goes quiet while they absorb this. Outside, the sun is setting over Central Park, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that look almost artificial. Guy breaks the silence. How do you know about the Italians? Barnes reaches into his jacket and pulls out a manila envelope, tosses it onto the coffee table. I know about the Italians because the Italians know I know, and they want me to know they don't give a fuck as long as I don't interfere with their operations in the Bronx. That's photographs from 1966. Crawford with Carlo Gambino. Crawford with his hand out taking cash. Crawford signing papers that made a murder charge disappear. The Italians kept copies because they're smart. They gave me copies because they respect me more than they fear the government.
Frank picks up the envelope, looks inside, whistles low. This is nuclear. This is leverage, Barnes corrects, but we're not going to use it the way you think. Crawford's got 3 things he loves. We're going to take all 3, and we're going to do it in 72 hours because I gave him a deadline and Nicky Barnes keeps his word. Guy is already scribbling, making lists, drawing connections. The money, you said offshore? Cayman Islands, 3 accounts, 1.7 million total last I checked. We've got a banker at Chase on the payroll, guy who handles wire transfers. He can access the routing information. And the boat? Greenwich Yacht Club. Security is a joke, mostly rich white men who think crime happens somewhere else. We get the boat, we bring it to Harlem, we make a statement. Frank is grinning now, seeing the shape of it. What kind of statement? Barnes stands, walks to the window, looks out at the city spreading in every direction, millions of lights beginning to glow as darkness falls. The kind that reminds everyone who really runs New York. The kind that teaches respect to people who think they're untouchable. Crawford wants to send me back to Harlem? Fine. I'll take his legacy back to Harlem with me. Let's see how he likes it. They work through the night, making calls, activating networks, moving pieces into place. The banker at Chase, a nervous man named Stevens who owes Barnes for keeping his cocaine habit quiet, confirms he can access Crawford's accounts, but needs 48 hours to make the transfers look legitimate. Barnes tells him he has 24 and hangs up. A crew in Greenwich, specialists who normally boost luxury cars from driveways in Westport, get instructions about the yacht, not to sell it, not to sink it, but to sail it down the coast and up the Harlem River to Pier 17 at 125th Street. They think Barnes is crazy, but they don't argue. Nobody argues with Nicky Barnes, not if they want to keep working. By dawn, the plan is in motion, and Barnes is gone. He doesn't go to Harlem, he goes to Atlantic City, checks into a suite at the Golden Nugget under a fake name, and disappears. His lawyers don't know where he is, his crew doesn't know where he is, the underworld buzzes with rumors. Barnes ran, Barnes is hiding, Barnes knows the feds are coming back with new charges. On the evening news, Richard Crawford holds a press conference outside his office in Manhattan, looking composed and confident, fielding questions about the verdict. Mr. Crawford, do you have any comment on Nicky Barnes' threat? Crawford smiles thinly. Mr. Barnes is a criminal who got lucky with a jury. His threats are as empty as his claims of legitimacy. Justice might have failed today, but the streets won't. I have full confidence that Mr. Barnes will face the consequences of his actions, legal or otherwise. Are you concerned for your safety? Not at all. Mr. Barnes is a coward who hides behind expensive lawyers and expensive clothes. Now that the cameras are off, he's probably hiding in whatever hole he crawled out of. Let him make his threats. I sleep soundly at night. The reporters eat it up. The story becomes about prosecutorial confidence in the face of criminal intimidation. Crawford's boss, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, puts out a statement supporting him. The narrative seems set. Barnes is running scared, Crawford is standing tall, and in 72 hours, nothing will happen because nothing ever happens when criminals make threats. But in Atlantic City, Nicky Barnes sits in his hotel suite watching the press conference on television, drinking cognac and playing solitaire, and the smile never leaves his face. Hour 24 arrives on a Thursday morning. Richard Crawford is in his home office in Greenwich, Connecticut, a restored colonial with 6 bedrooms and 2 acres overlooking Long Island Sound, when his wife Eleanor starts screaming from downstairs. He runs down to find her in the kitchen, still in her bathrobe, holding a FedEx envelope with her hands shaking. Her face is white, bloodless, like she's seen something that defies explanation. "Richard, what is this? What the fuck is this?" He takes the envelope, pulls out the documents inside. Bank statements, Cayman National Bank, 3 accounts, all in his name, all showing the same thing. Current balance, $0.00. Withdrawal history showing massive electronic transfers executed at 3 a.m. the previous night. Everything drained, moved to accounts in Zurich and Singapore and Hong Kong. Vanished into the international banking system like water into sand. Crawford actually staggers, has to grip the kitchen counter to stay upright. $1.7 million. Gone. His retirement, his insurance policy,
the money he's been carefully accumulating for 30 years through favors and fixes and looking the other way at the right moments. Eleanor is still screaming, asking him questions he can't answer, demanding to know how this happened, who did this, what they're going to do. He calls the bank in the Caymans. They confirm the transfers were legitimate, properly authorized with his account codes and passwords. He asks how that's possible, and they politely suggest he review his account security practices and hang up. He calls the FBI, then realizes he can't call the FBI without explaining why he has $1.7 million in the Cayman Islands on a prosecutor's salary. He stands in his kitchen, still holding the statements, while his wife cries and curses and throws a coffee mug against the wall. And for the first time in 30 years, Richard Crawford understands what it feels like to be powerless. Hour 36 comes on Thursday evening. The Legacy is reported stolen from Greenwich Yacht Club. The dockmaster discovered it missing during his evening rounds, the slip empty, the security camera conveniently showing nothing but static for the previous 4 hours. Coast Guard is alerted. Police file a report. Crawford gets the call at home and actually laughs, high and hysterical, because of course Barnes went after the boat too. Eleanor looks at him like he's losing his mind, which maybe he is. It's connected, he tells her, pacing the living room, trying to think like a prosecutor again, trying to find the angle. You need to call the police. You need to... And tell them what? That a drug dealer I insulted in court is systematically destroying my life? They'll investigate. They'll find the Cayman accounts. They'll ask questions I can't answer. We're on our own. But they're not on their own. By hour 48, half of Greenwich knows the boat is missing, and the other half knows Crawford's wife has been calling divorce attorneys. The whisper network that connects wealthy communities is faster and more efficient than any law enforcement agency, and by Friday afternoon, the story is everywhere. Crawford is in trouble, some kind of financial problem. His wife is leaving him. His boat was stolen. There's something wrong. Crawford is in his office, door locked, shades drawn, when his secretary buzzes to say there's a call on line 2, no name, says it's urgent. He picks up, and a voice he doesn't recognize, male, calm, says, "Check Pier 17, Harlem. Your Legacy's waiting." The line goes dead. Crawford sits there holding the phone, and something breaks inside him. Not his courage. He never really had courage, just privilege and position. What breaks is his certainty, his understanding that the world works a certain way, and he's on the winning side. He gets his coat and drives into the city, south on High 95, then across the Triborough Bridge, into Harlem, to 125th Street, to the pier.
There's a crowd, maybe 500 people, growing by the minute. Music playing from car stereos, kids running around laughing, old men drinking from paper bags and shaking their heads in amazement. And there, docked at the pier in the middle of Harlem, is the Legacy. Except it's not his legacy anymore. It's been transformed, violated, turned into a monument to his humiliation. The white hull is covered in fluorescent graffiti, massive letters in pink and green and yellow, Crawford's dirty money along one side, racist yacht along the other. The sails have been unfurled and decorated with blown-up photographs, Crawford shaking hands with Carlo Gambino, Crawford accepting an envelope of cash, Crawford signing documents with known mobsters. Each photograph is labeled with dates and locations, a public record of corruption displayed like art in a Harlem gallery. News crews are already there, cameras filming, reporters interviewing people in the crowd. Crawford tries to leave, gets back in his car, but he's boxed in by the crowd, by the people who have come to see the spectacle of a powerful man brought low. A young black reporter, can't be more than 25, taps on his window with a microphone. Mr. Crawford, can you comment? Is it true this boat was bought with bride money? What's your relationship with the Gambino family, Mr. Crawford?" He sits in his car, gripping the steering wheel, while flashbulbs pop and people point and laugh and take pictures. The story leads every news broadcast that night. Federal prosecutor's yacht found covered in corruption allegations. The photographs are too blurry to prove anything in court, but they're clear enough for television, clear enough for public opinion. By midnight, Crawford's boss has called demanding his resignation. By 1 a.m., his wife has left for her sister's house in Boston. By 2 a.m., he's sitting alone in his empty house in Greenwich, understanding with perfect clarity that his life as he knew it is over. The phone rings at hour 71, Saturday afternoon.
Crawford answers without checking the caller ID, beyond caring. Mr. Crawford, you have 1 hour left. The voice is cultured, educated, calm. Nicky Barnes, calling from a payphone somewhere, impossible to trace. Barnes, you son of a bitch, you. 1 hour. The apology. Courthouse steps. Full press. Say what I tell you to say, or tomorrow, your daughter at Yale gets a package. Everything. The account statement showing money transferred into her name. The photographs, with a letter explaining Daddy's 30-year relationship with organized crime. The boat registration, showing it's actually in her name to avoid taxes. I'll destroy our future the same way I destroyed yours. Or you can apologize. Crawford's hand is shaking so badly he can barely hold the phone. What do you want me to say? Barnes tells him, word for word. Makes him repeat it twice to make sure he has it right. Then hangs up without saying goodbye, leaving Crawford sitting in his ruined house, looking at a script for his own humiliation.
Sunday morning, 11 a.m., the courthouse steps where 3 days earlier Nicky Barnes walked out a free man. Richard Crawford stands behind a podium that someone from his office set up, facing a crowd of reporters who showed up because the story is too good to miss. He looks like he's aged 10 years. His suit is wrinkled, his tie is crooked, his eyes are hollow. He pulls a piece of paper from his pocket, unfolds it with shaking hands and reads, I apologize to Mr. Nicholas Barnes. My comments during his trial were racist and unprofessional. He is not a clown. He is a businessman, and I was wrong to disrespect him or the community of Harlem, which deserves the same respect as any other community in this city. I spoke from prejudice and ignorance. I spoke from a position of privilege that I no longer possess, and I am deeply, truly sorry. The silence is absolute. No one asks questions. No one needs to. Crawford folds the paper, puts it back in his pocket, and walks away. The cameras follow him to his car. He drives away and doesn't come back. His resignation letter is on his boss's desk by Monday morning. He moves to Florida 2 weeks later, takes a job as a public defender in Tallahassee making $40,000 a year, and never speaks about Nicky Barnes again. In Harlem, the story becomes legend. The yacht stays docked at 125th Street for a week before the city finally tows it away. But in that week, it becomes a tourist attraction. People come from Brooklyn, from the Bronx, from Queens to see it, to take pictures, to marvel at the fact that Nicky Barnes made a federal prosecutor kneel. The photographs of Crawford and the mobsters get copied and distributed, showing up in barber shops and bars, proof that the system is corrupt, that the game is rigged, but also proof that sometimes if you're smart enough and bold enough and ruthless enough, you can beat the game at its own rules. Barnes stays in Atlantic City for another week, then returns to Harlem like Caesar returning to Rome. There's a new venture opening, the Harlem River Casino, and he's the silent partner behind it. Money laundered through construction companies and real estate trusts. The opening is a party that lasts 3 days. Miles Davis plays the first night. Muhammad Ali shows up the second night. By the third night, everyone who matters in New York has come through, paid their respects, understood the message. Nicky Barnes is untouchable not because the law can't reach him, but because he operates on a level where law is just one more tool, one more game, one more thing to be mastered and manipulated. A reporter from the Amsterdam News catches him on the third night, champagne glass in hand, white fur coat over his shoulders despite the June heat, surrounded by beautiful women and dangerous men. Nicky, can I ask you about the Crawford situation? Barnes sips his champagne, considers the question like a philosophy professor examining a particularly interesting paradox. I don't know any Mr. Crawford, but I'll say this. Harlem has a long memory. We respect those who respect us, and we have a very particular way of teaching respect to those who don't. You come into our neighborhood, you treat us like human beings, you acknowledge our dignity, we'll do business. You'll find we're reasonable people. But you come at us with disrespect, with racism, with the assumption that we're beneath you. He smiles, shakes his head. Then you learn. One way or another, you learn. The quote makes the front page. It gets repeated in other papers, then in magazines, then in the streets. It becomes part of the Nicky Barnes mythology, along with the white Cadillac and the diamond rings, and the way he could walk into a restaurant and everyone would stand up. But more than that, it establishes a rule, an understanding that ripples out through every level of New York's power structure. For the next 2 years, until his eventual arrest on new charges in 1979, no federal agent openly disrespects Nicky Barnes. No mafia capo makes jokes about him in public. No rival dealer questions his authority.
The word spreads through police precincts in Brooklyn, through social clubs in Little Italy, through corporate offices in Midtown. You want to deal with Barnes? Deal straight. Negotiate, compete, even fight if you have to. But don't you ever, ever disrespect him. Because Nicky Barnes doesn't just kill you. He takes everything you are first, and he lets the world watch.
The yacht eventually gets sold at police auction, bought by a doctor from New Jersey who strips off the graffiti and repaints it, erasing the evidence but not the memory. The photographs of Crawford and the mobsters disappear from official circulation, but copies remain, passed hand to hand, proof of a truth everyone suspected but could never prove. The money in the Cayman accounts is never recovered, lost in the maze of international finance, probably sitting in accounts that Barnes will never touch, but keeps as insurance, as leverage, as proof that he can reach anyone, anywhere. Crawford dies in 1994, liver cancer, in a modest apartment in Tallahassee. His obituary in the Times mentions his years as a prosecutor, but glosses over the end, calling it a controversial conclusion to a distinguished career. No one comes to the funeral except his daughter, who forgave him eventually, but never forgot. The legacy sinks in a storm off the coast of New Jersey in 2001, taking with it the last physical evidence of that summer, though by then it doesn't matter. The story has passed into legend, the kind of story that gets told in different versions in different places, in Harlem barbershops, in federal courtrooms, in business schools as a case study in psychological warfare. And the legend says this: in the summer of 1977, when disco was dying and punk was being born and New York was going bankrupt, a black man from Harlem taught the United States government a lesson about respect. He did it without firing a shot, without breaking a window, without raising his voice. He did it with patience and planning and a perfect understanding of what power actually means in a world where everyone is corruptible and everyone loves something they can't afford to lose. He took a racist dignity and displayed it on a yacht in Harlem, covered in graffiti that told the truth about American justice. He took ill-gotten money and made it disappear, proving that wealth without respect is just numbers on paper. He took a man's certainty about his place in the world and shattered it completely, leaving him broken and apologizing on courthouse steps while cameras rolled and the world watched. And in doing so, Nicky Barnes became more than a drug dealer, more than a criminal, more than even the Mr. Untouchable that the press called him. He became a symbol of something new and dangerous and undeniable. The idea that in the new New York, the old rules about who had power and who deserved respect were no longer fixed. That a kid from the projects could make a Yale lawyer beg. That intelligence and ruthlessness and understanding human nature could beat badges and titles and institutional authority. That respect, in the end, was the only currency that truly mattered, and the only one that couldn't be counterfeited or stolen or regulated by law. The lesson echoed through the halls of power for years afterward, whispered in prosecutors' offices and police briefings and organized crime meetings. Don't underestimate the street. Don't assume privilege protects you. And never ever make the mistake of thinking that someone is beneath you just because they came from somewhere different, looked different, spoke different. Because if you make that mistake with the wrong person, you might find yourself standing on courthouse steps reading an apology while your legacy burns behind you, covered in graffiti and truth. And so the showdown that changed Harlem forever wasn't really about Harlem at all. It was about what happens when disrespect meets consequence, when privilege meets power, when the old America collides with the new one being born in streets and projects and nightclubs, where the rules were being rewritten by people who had never been asked for permission. It was about a moment when one man decided he'd had enough of being told his place and had the intelligence and resources and sheer audacity to teach his oppressor what powerlessness actually felt like. The yacht is gone now. The money is scattered. Crawford is dead. And Nicky Barnes himself eventually fell, betrayed by his own organization and turned informant in 1984, dying in witness protection in 2012 under a name nobody knows. But the story remains, told and retold, embellished and mythologized, until it's hard to separate truth from legend. Did it happen exactly this way? Maybe. Probably not. Does it matter? Not really. Because what matters is what the story means, what it represents, what it proves about the way power works and respect is earned, and how sometimes, just sometimes, the underdog wins not with violence, but with vision.
In Harlem today, if you walk down 125th Street and find the old-timers sitting on stoops and standing on corners, they'll tell you about that summer, about the yacht that appeared one morning covered in truth, about the prosecutor who apologized, about the 72 hours that proved Nicky Barnes was exactly what he claimed to be, a man who kept his promises, demanded his respect, and refused to accept anyone's definition of his place in the world. They'll tell you it was beautiful. They'll tell you it was justice. They'll tell you it was the moment when Harlem proved it could beat the system not by destroying it, but by using its own weapons better than the system ever could. And whether you believe them or not, whether the story is exactly true or just emotionally true, doesn't change what it represents. A moment when respect stopped being something that could be granted or withheld by authority and became something that had to be earned, maintained, and defended by everyone equally. A moment when the old hierarchies cracked just enough to let something new through. A moment when a man in a white suit proved that the future belonged to whoever was smart enough and brave enough to take it, regardless of where they started or what anyone thought they deserved. That's the showdown that changed Harlem forever. Not a battle fought with guns, but a war won with intelligence. Not a riot, but a revolution in understanding. Not destruction, but the most elegant, devastating, perfect humiliation of power by someone who understood that real strength doesn't announce itself with violence. It simply demonstrates with calm precision that it exists and that it cannot be dismissed or disrespected without consequence. And in the end, standing on those courthouse steps with cameras rolling and history watching, Richard Crawford learned what Nicky Barnes had known all along, that respect isn't about position or privilege or the law. It's about understanding human nature deeply enough to know exactly what someone values and being willing to take it if they forget to treat you like you matter. That's power. That's respect. And that's the lesson that echoed through New York for years afterward, changing not just Harlem, but everyone who heard the story and understood what it really meant.